A client is using an Apollo scraper to gain access to a bunch of leads, and they wanted me to go in and enrich the data and validate which leads are worth reaching out to. Their offer is done for you Instagram Reels, organic content using AI videos, specifically UGC. And they're targeting Shopify store owners who are not active on Instagram. So, like many of you who are watching, if you own a business, you can't just go into Apollo and say people who don't use Instagram or don't use Instagram X amount of times per month. That's where scraping the leads and the search results that are close enough and then going through and processing them is going to give you a Google Sheet similar to this if you do some of the stuff that I do. So here we have some custom fields here. All of these guys right here are custom fields to scraping, and we're going to dive into how this works in this video. Obviously, some of this is redacted. We've scraped hundreds of leads, or actually rather processed hundreds of leads for this client, but we only have a handful here as examples. So all Shopify stores, you can actually sort by their best-selling products through the URL parameters. And so we have their best two selling products here. We've also humanized these names to be as natural as possible. If someone had if there's an old school example here, if someone had like a neon blue fidget spinner, parentheses, lightweight, you're not going to say that in your cold email. You're just going to say fidget spinner. So we've normalized and humanized these names. We also have their Instagram and how many Instagram reels they've posted. Max of 15 is what we're looking at within the last 30 days. And then we also have some more dynamic lines here that you'll see in the copy in a second. But here, if we go back to the copy, this is the copy they provided. And so we have a couple variables here. So I reverse engineer from the copy that they provide. For example, we have product name 1 here. Product name, product 1 name, product 2 sentence, which I'll explain later on. We also have product 2 name, PS line, and a couple other things like that. So I take what they want with their copy, I reverse engineer it, and try and figure out how I can process these leads using NAN, sometimes custom software, whatever's required to get the job done. But before I continue, if you are a business owner who wants a cold email system set up to be able to go through and scrape and process leads with AI personalization, or you already have cold email and you want personalization sprinkled on top, click on the top link in the pinned comment. And if you're a beginner who wants access to these templates and to learn from some of the stuff that I'm doing, go ahead and click on the second link in the pinned comment. So let's actually dive in here. We have a couple different scenarios because I want to make this super user-friendly for the client. They have to just export their data. That's what they wanted. They still want to control over exporting their data, and they upload it to a Google Drive folder. Here we have this redacted file as an example, and then this NAN process right here is going to notice that. So let's go ahead and dive into how some of this data works. I'm going to go quick. This is going to be a step-by-step tutorial on how to build out all this. Again, the templates and all that are in the second link in the pinned comment. I'm mostly just going over the high-level concepts here. So here we're going to look for all the different files within the drive. In this case, we have one result, obviously, one file. Makes sense. Another thing that's a quick note for those of you who might be building systems like this is when you're using Google Sheets and you are using dynamic sheets. For example, if I go over to here, we have to pass in the document ID, but we can't just pass in the document ID because each sheet has this little name at the bottom. And this is something you cannot pass in by the name. It'll also be a pain to do that. You have to keep them all the same or have some way to pass that in, but you need it as an ID. So what we do here is we're going to use the Google Sheets API to access this ID and then pass it into the sub workflow. So effectively, all we're doing here is just accessing the sheet, make sure we have access to all the data for the sheet, and then we're going to move forward. Now, I don't want the client to have to add in these custom rows each time they want to use it. Actually, in fact, these ones right here are all custom, including the final email, which is just a combination of personal email and normal email. But anyways, my automation will create these automatically for us. So here we're getting the headers. We're seeing what exists in types of the headers. And if they don't exist, we're going to add them only once. And then afterwards, we're going to continue on and loop through. Now, when looping through, we're simply just going to run this second workflow here, and doing so is amazing. If you guys do not use sub workflows, it's great. And if you're on the cloud, that doesn't actually cost any extra usage. Only your main executions cost usage. So it's really nice that you can do that. So with that said, I'm able to process things, 40, 50 times faster than if I were to just wait for one at a time by just running 8 to 10 of these concurrently. Now, you do have to be aware of your Appify usage. If I go to Appify here, you have a max number of concurrent RAM at the same time. That could be a problem. You also might have some Google Sheets APIs, depending on how fast you're going and how much data you're storing. I add in a wait here. Wait 3 seconds in between each run. It usually runs between 5 to 10 of them concurrently at the same time, and it's able to process a bunch more leads a lot faster. I mean, the client gets faster results, and that's the main goal, obviously. So let's dive into where everything actually is for the main meat and potatoes of the automation. Here we have a master spreadsheet called final data, which is going to contain all of the things we've processed through all spreadsheets. This is not something that's really client facing. It's more so just a database to check to see if we've already processed this lead. There are costs involved with processing the lead with OpenAI credits, through NAN executions, or more importantly, Apify credits as well. And so we want to avoid redoing that work if possible. So we're simply going to check to see if we have a new lead. Now, in this case, this is where everything becomes custom. Your use case might be completely different. In my case, these are Shopify stores we're scraping to try and find their Instagram. So we're going to first ping the website. And then once we ping the website, we're just simply going to do a GET request on their main website. And we're passing in some headers here. You'll find these in the template. These are some headers you can ask ChatGPT to generate them that make the browser think, or that make the recipient think where it might be a browser. It's not perfect. It's not going to work for everything, but it worked for Shopify, so it's good enough for this automation. Let's now move on. So sometimes when you're doing Apollo searches, if you use Apollo, they're not always perfect. Sometimes you get things that aren't directly what you're looking for. In this case, they have a lot of other e-commerce stores in the search results, WooCommerce, Squarespace, things like that. We need to filter those out. And sometimes they have things that are like third-party e-commerce agency if you want to filter those out too. We're simply going to see how many instances of cdn.shopify exist on the HTML. And if it is less than 5, we're going to ignore it. If it's more than 5, we're going to continue on. If anything slips through the cracks, it's going to get caught right here. Like I mentioned earlier, you can sort by all the Shopify bestsellers or all the Shopify products by their best selling. So here we add on this to the end of the URL, and we're able to find all their products, hence the collections all, and we're sorting by best selling. And again, we're passing the same headers to make it seem like we're a real person. And then we're going to try and get the names of those products through AI. Now you might be thinking, why not just use custom JavaScript in order to parse the names and not use extra tokens? In this case, Shopify themes have a lot of different code a lot of the times, and so I didn't want to spend however many hours it would take to match each possible use case. That would be a huge task. So we're just passing it into AI and seeing how good we can get with that. So in this case, AI, obviously, the more text you pass in, the more it's going to cost. So we're going to try and minimize that. We're going to turn the HTML into Markdown, which still has all the meaningful data in it. It's just a lot less of the behind the scenes code that humans don't actually see when visiting the web page. So we don't necessarily need it. Let's dive into this prompt. Get product names. Using GPT-4o, we're asking to return this format here. Product 1 name, product 2 name, both as strings. And I also provide an example of the email copy here. And so the reason why I provide this is because I needed to understand where these variables are going to be used. Product 1 name almost directly matches product 1 name here. And also product 2 name is somewhere right here, product 2 name. So I needed to understand that it needs to grammatically fit within these sentences. That's why I provide the examples. And I also tell it, avoid things like gift cards, new arrivals. Some products are going to be named those. And so we want to avoid those. That's just what I saw after testing this on a sample set of data. So scrolling down, I have a couple examples of good examples. And I noticed that after I provided a couple of good examples, it was good to go. And so I didn't provide any more after that. And all we're doing is we're passing in the HTML, or more specifically the Markdown from the website, and we're going to continue on. Now also we have JavaScript here that's going to try and find any Instagram links on their website. If they have Instagram links, we're going to continue on directly to scrape the Instagram. What happens if they don't have Instagram links? Well, we're using Apify to effectively Google search site:instagram.com. If you used Google search before, you could do site:website, and it'll force the results to only come from that website. So in this case, we're only looking for Instagram.com websites. And then for the query, we're passing in that person's brand name within quotes. So it must contain this on Instagram. Chances of us finding their Instagram, if it exists, pretty high. From there, we're going to pass all the results into AI. We're going to pass in their brand name, their website, their industry, and then the Google search results. And it's going to return back what it believes to be the correct one. I have a small prompt here, basically says that don't do your best guess, only the correct one or null. Because obviously if we are processing the wrong Instagram, they don't even have an Instagram. We said, hey, we just saw you posted 3 times last month. We could help you out. They're going to be like, this is spam because I didn't post at all. I don't have an Instagram. So moving on, we now have found from Google if this is false. So we set this to a bad lead. If I come over here, we see that this is set to not qualified. And so that means that there's a couple different cases that this can happen. If they post more than 15 times per month, this person does not want to reach out to them. They want to reach out to people who post less than 15 times per month. And so our limit on our Apify scraper is 15. Sometimes these get through. I'm not sure why we have 30 here and 20 here, but it's fine. So this is simply just going to get the last 15 reels in the last month, and then we're going to continue on. So now we're going to count the results. We're going to return a couple things here. Basically, if it's greater than 15, we're going to say not qualified. If it is going to be between 1 and 14 reels, we're going to set this PS statement here. I'll explain the PS statements in a second. No IG, we're going to set a different PS statement. And then if they haven't posted any reels, for example, they have an Instagram that just posts photos, we're then going to do a different PS statement. We're going to return the PS statement and also the amount of reels. Then we're just going to store that, and then we're going to continue on. These things here are just some admin stuff like storing it to the final sheet. And then after we're done, we're going to see if there's any more leads to process in this. For example, are we done processing this sheet? If so, we're going to move it to the next one. And that's the entire system. So the PS statement, if I go in here, is this right here. So I saw you posted 14 reels last month. So I figured sharing a batch of ready to post videos might help. So you haven't posted any reels last 30 days. Not qualified means they posted too many. So you posted 2 reels last month. So it's basically just spin tax, but it's dynamic because we might not use it in certain ways. And the sentence 2 is also spin tax, but it's also, you see how we're starting with a comma and not ending with a period? We might use this. We might not. Let's look at the actual syntax here. We have product to sentence, no space or comma anything here, and ending in a period, which means if product to sentence is empty, the sentence still works. And so we don't have to worry about that. So product to sentence is something that can be there, but if they don't have a second product for whatever reason, the email won't look weird. It won't say, and I made another blank for blank, because that looks weird. So we're trying to make sure the syntax and all the variables always work well. So this is how I went through, and they can now just upload things to Google Sheets, highly qualify all of their prospects that they're reaching out to make sure that it's people that will actually be interested and of service for this offer. So again, if you're a business owner and you want a system like this done, custom built directly for your exact ICP, your exact cold email strategy and everything else, I can go through and do that. Just click on the top link in the pinned comment. And again, if you're a beginner, you want access to these templates, you want to ask for support, click on the second link in the pinned comment.